Interesting.
I think we're recording. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jody LaPlay. My pronouns are she, hers, and I am your instructional technology specialist with Northwest Regional and also a part of the Cascade Tech Alliance. And I am here with my partner, Corinne Wyatt, and she is also supporting our Google series. This is our Lunch and Learn, the Wednesday series, and we also have the First Friday Fast 15s that are on the first Friday. So we're glad you're here. Today we're going to look at managing files and folders in the Google Workspace. And so you're going to hear me say Workspaces again later because Google named one of its features a workspace. So there's a workspace within the workspace. So just to make sure that's super clear and exciting. So at any time, please put a question or a comment in the chat, unmute yourself. We all have different experiences and knowledge about Google. And so I know in this series, I've learned something new from each of you. So we want this to be a collaborative space. We have a little bit of guided work here, and then there'll be time at the end for you to ask any of your Google or other tech questions. And so just let us know how we can, what questions you have there. And I think I need to move this out of the way. So today our goals are to think of some naming conventions for our files and our folders to help with us being able to find all the things that we have in our drive. We'll take a peek at the file structure. That'll be just kind of a quick overview and review of how Google has things set up. Then we'll look at priority, workspaces, starred files, and then we'll end with any wonderings and tip sharing that you have. But of course, if it fits to share or ask at any point, please do. All right, so getting right into it, and I'm going to hide this. So Corinne, I am hiding this little floating panel, so I won't see a chat. So maybe. All right. Okay, I'm not hiding it. I'm just going to scoot it. So things to consider when you are about to save or start a file. Are to, and we'll look at this too, but to remember the different searching parameters, because you might want to include some of those details in your title of your file. And also to remember that the way that Google is going to sort your files and list them is either going to be by their name A to Z or Z to A, or by the modification date. And so to be thinking about how this sorting and searching works to also just help us be able to find and locate those files as quickly as possible. If you're working in teams or with your coworkers on certain projects or files that you share, then get together with them if you can and say, how about, for this project, let's try to follow this naming convention. And that way you have a structure that will just help when you're looking for things. And then you can rename a file at any time. So we'll look at how you can rename things. If you realize that you keep looking for a certain file and you keep forgetting what it's called, then you might want to add some things to it or rename it. So the big tips are to be consistent, be descriptive. So include that project or that title. Include the date if that is going to, that might be something that's really important, is the date of when that you're using that file or creating that file. If it's a file or something that you're using with a specific department, or even the version of it, if it's a collaborative document going back and forth, or even file status. So if you're in charge of doing something getting a file ready and it's ready to go, then you can put like final draft, and then the next person knows it's ready for their step.
Jody, can I interrupt really quick?
Please, yes, please. Yep.
So I think those of us that have been using computers for a long time got used to truncating file names, because computers, like regular computers, don't allow for that. But when you're in the Google space, or really online anywhere, you don't have a limit to the number of characters you can use in a file name. So that be descriptive is really useful when you're naming things, because it can be as long as you need it to be. And so make it searchable so that you can find it later, like searchable as in detailed enough to be searchable. It's something I found really useful. And then the other thing about naming is, we talked about this early on. Jody wasn't with the agency yet when we moved from Outlook to Google for mail and calendar, that kind of the final move, is we can develop some protocol for naming conventions. You could do it within your own department, but we could do it in the agency too, where there's some kind of pattern so that you don't really have to think about like at this point in the Google world, when something's been shared with you, you kind of have to think like that other person to be able to find it. Like, what would they have named it? Or what would be the content in here that I could search on? We can develop some naming conventions. So if you're interested in that, we can kind of move that direction. We would involve communications as well as technology to figure out the best method. But if you're struggling to find things that have been shared with you, that might be a strategy we could use.
Love that. Thank you. I was hoping you were going to jump in on this part too. So thank you. The other piece, because of how the structure works within Google, and that it's alphabetical or by their modification date, if you do need your folders, if that helps you to have your folders in a different order, then you would want to name your folders with the number in front of the title of the folder. And you can rename folders. So if I had a folder that I needed to be number 2, I could change Canvas from number 2 and make it number 3 or whatever. So I want to take a quick peek at that. If it will, here we go. So here is not my drive. This floating panel is really gonna push my buttons today. There we go. So I go to my little waffle and I go to drive. And if you want to look at all, and we're going to have a session on searching, but if you click on this little icon here to search, it should give me some of the parameters. So of course, we know we have our file types, we have our owners, you have the location. So in my drive, in shared drive, that modification date has the words. So you can be thinking about how you will search and kind of find things, if that helps you with your naming conventions. I also wanted to go back here real fast and point out right now, if I'm in my drive, I have it in this kind of grid view. But remember, you can switch it to the list view. And you can also pop it out here on the left-hand side. But then you can just kind of notice some of those naming conventions of that file structure. And so I was going to show, I have my early intervention, early childhood. And so I named that, I put that department right in the name of the file right at the beginning. And then today's slides, I put the whole title of our session, and then I said this was a lunch and learn. So like Corinne was saying, your title really can be as long as you need it to be to really help you do that.
Emma has a question, Jody.
Oh, thank you. Yes. I cannot see it right now at the moment.
It must be simple, but how do you change from the grid view to the list view?
Yes, so there is this little icon over here in the right-hand corner.
Right-hand corner.
Yep, and so grid view shows me my files or my folders. Let me get into a better, too deep in something here. So right now I'm in the grid view, and then if I click on it, it'll go to the list view. And so from here, this is where you could sort by name, A to Z, Z to A, or you can do last modified by me, or last opened by me or you. But those are the only current ways to sort unless you renamed things and you wanted. So if you right click on a folder or a file, right click, and you can rename right from here. And so if I wanted this to be at the top, I can do that, and then I'll always keep that at the top. I guess it won't always keep it at the top if you have it going with your name up like that. I learn something every 5 seconds in Google here. And then you can color code if that helps. I'm a visual person, and so when I am in my, where I guess we're all visual people too, Jody. But it's kind of nice to color code. You can right click on that folder and change color. And I could have all my Canvas things be red if I wanted to just really connect Canvas and red in my head. Good question. Thank you, Emma. And then I can switch back to the grid view. So think about those important naming conventions that will work for you and for your team. And again, as Corinne just said, if there are some protocols that we should do as an organization, we can work together on that as well. All right, so file structure. So we know we've been working with and learning more about Drive this year. And so when you open up Drive, you know that it's going to list on that left-hand side your priority box, your My Drive, your shared drive. And then also you can look at those files that were shared with you. I spent a lot of time in my recent, in this recent tab. We're going to talk about starred tabs today. And then there's your trash. When you open one of these, then it's going to show your drive or the folders in that. It's going to open up all the things in that drive. Then it's going to list the folders and then subfolders within that folder. And that could be one or many. And then you'll see all your files in there as well. And then I wanted to remind folks that we have multiple sessions on the differences between shared drives and shared folders. And so check out those resources, the slide decks, and the YouTube channel that has the recorded sessions of those. When you're in your drive, I wanted to point out some icons that you might see. So if you see this folder with an arrow, that means that I have added that folder. That folder isn't my folder, it was shared with me, but I've added a shortcut to my drive so that I can find that easily, and I'll demo how to do that. And then if you have a folder with a little person in it, that means that that folder has been shared with someone else. And so that person can add things to it, edit things depending on the permissions that you've granted. But then you know, is this a folder that only I can see, or is that a folder that I have shared with others? So I want to show this. This is I have to hide my floating. This is a slide deck that a colleague has shared with me. So it's in her drive, it's her, she's the owner of the file, but I want to be able to access it in my drive without having to search my shared areas. Of course, there's multiple ways that I could access it, but I'm going to click on File, and then I'm going to ask to add a shortcut to Drive. And so when I click on that, then it's going to list the folders. And I think I already shared this with myself. And then I can say I want to share it in that folder. And then there it is. So this is my colleague's file, but now I have it saved in my book club folder. And there's that arrow letting me know, there's that icon letting me know it's not mine, but it's a shortcut to her drive where she has this slide deck. And so that we can both be editing it, but I can keep it organized in my book club folder. And so let me show that one more time. So here are a bunch of files that have been shared with me. They're not mine, but if I right click on it, I can say add shortcut to drive, which is my drive. And then it's going to say here, where do you want it to go? My drive. And then I can put it in any of these of my folders, and then there'll be a shortcut to it. And that will just help me be able to locate it faster. So shared with me shortcut icon, and then this is one of my folders that has that I've added folks to, so that I've shared that folder with them. All right, the priority inbox. This is kind of a speedy efficiency tool that Google has provided. And so I have my Drive set up so that when I open Drive, it drops me in my priority. I think the default is my Drive. And so if you want to, when you open Drive, be in that priority, which means it's going to show you files that you recently viewed. So it's kind of predicting, it knows where you've been, and it's kind of predicting, I bet you're opening Drive to continue to work on those files. And then in priority, you also can create and access those workspaces or the hidden workspaces, and we'll talk about those as well. To set that default, there's some steps here, and you can come back to this. But also, if I go back, if you're in your Drive, doesn't matter which button here on the left you're on, but if you go to settings or the gear, which is for settings, and open up settings, there are some default things that you can change. And this one is make priority my default homepage. So if you want every time you open Drive to be dropped into priority, see those files you were working on, see the workspaces that we'll talk about here in a moment, then you'll go to the gear, settings, and you'll make sure that box is checked right there. Make priority my default homepage. There's a couple other things that you can have Google do for you. Show suggested files in your My Drive. That might be already checked. Show suggested files in the shared with me. And then I just recently realized that, so the side note here, but since we're in settings, that this offline is default not clicked. And so you might want to click that and have your documents always be available if you are offline. So I was traveling yesterday, and I knew that I was going to have a little bit of time during that time where I didn't have internet access. So I went and made sure I had that clicked. And that way I could go right into my Drive. And even though I wasn't connected, I could still work on those recent files that I've been working on. So check out the gear and see if that will help with some of your workflow.
Yeah,
well.
if you have questions about that later, that is a super, super, super useful tool. Just because like Jody could be on the plane yesterday and be working, and then when she connected to wireless again, it made all the changes to those Google Docs.
Yes.
It's such a beautiful thing. So if you're not using it,
was magical.
Highly recommended.
Yes, yes. So loved that. And every time I should learn the keystrokes for that. All right, so priority. And I am glad I have mine set at priority because it really just helps me just find those documents that I'm working with right there. Workspaces, and you may have been in a session before where we talked about this, but this is a little private space. Only you have access to this, where you create shortcuts to the files for different projects you might be working on. And I'll show you my example. Right now, it's a max of 25 file shortcuts. So if you're working on a project that has more than 25, then you might have a Workspace Part 1 and Workspace Part 2 for that project. You get to hide that workspace if you're done working on it, or you can totally delete it if you no longer need that shortcut. And again, it is just private for only you. But if you were working on a project with multiple people and maybe your shared folder wasn't the best way for you to be sharing and working on those documents, then when you're in Google, there is a feature called Spaces, and you can share files and collaborate there as well. So I'm going to pop out and I'm going to get this floating panel back. And so this is all in priority. And again, we were just talking about how my most recent files are here at the top, and I can scroll over. But when I scroll down a little bit here is Workspaces within Google Workspace. And here are some projects that I'm working on that I want to be able to access files that I created, but also files that others own, and it's shared with me. You can see some of the projects I'm working on. It tells you, it only shows you 5 at a time, but it tells me, hey, there's 5 more here. And so if I click on it, I don't want to click on that. If I click on it, then it tells me I have 9 of the 25, and it lists all of those files that I have that I'm shortcutting to. To add files, you click that. Google is going to say, well, this is titled coding. It kind of has, these are the titles of some of the other files on there, and it's going to show me my most recent. It might predict and think, I wonder if you want some of these files. You can go to your drive and go to your specific folders that you have. You could add a shortcut from a shared drive, or you can see shared with me. So you can kind of funnel that, put some parameters in there, or you just click search and you just start typing in whatever the title is that you're looking for, and then it'll find it. Being slow today. Here's today's. If I wanted that to be on this workspace, then I insert it. And there it is. And then if I say, oh, shoot, that was coding and not my Google one, I could just remove that from the workspace. And then I could go into my Google series, which is where I really should add that one. There was a project I was working on and I had a workspace for it, but that project ended. I didn't want to get rid of all those shortcuts in case that project reopens. So I did hide it. And so it's here. It has all the shortcuts to the files I was working on. And so that would look like, if you go to the 3 dots, if I was done with the Tech Talk series, and I could say, hide the workspace. And then it drops it down here. So I didn't lose the shortcuts to those files, but I just kind of cleaned up the visual space of what I'm currently working on. And then I did mention Spaces. So I just wanted to show you that that is over here on the left-hand side, holy moly. And so this is a group I'm working with, and we can share files there as well. So I could kind of make a workspace here with this team of the files that we're all adding to, and we can all see and work on together. All right. So starred files, we're probably mostly familiar with this one, but if there are documents that you go to on a daily or weekly basis, and you want to not have to search, and maybe they don't really go in a group to put it on a workspace, then you could star it. And then when you're in your drive and you click on the starred button there on the left, then you'll see all of your files that you've starred. If it's not a file you're going to that often, and I'm going to demo that here, because there's one that I looked at, I'm like, I don't need that starred anymore. So here are my starred. I have a folder starred. So this is a shared folder. It's not, I don't own it, but it's a group I'm working with. And so I starred it so that I can easily find that when I'm working with that group. And then these are some other files that I starred a while ago. And this was a project I was working on. So I was updating this weekly, but that project is done. So I'm going to just right click on it and choose remove from starred. It's still saved in that folder where I saved that document, but now it's not in this area that I'm not working on. And I'm actually going to remove most of these from starred. No, I'm going to keep those because I do go to those on a frequent basis. So for this one, you're probably not going to have that many in starred. Otherwise, it's just messy, and it might as well just be, in your drive where you just list all of your files, which I do need to clean some of those up and get those organized. So no, that was not a good example. Don't follow what I did there and have a bunch of files that are not organized. Okay. Those were my quick overviews. I want to remind you of the next events that are coming up and some resources. So they're all linked here. Those are the up and coming March Google series topics that we have. On March 2nd, we're also offering a quick review on how to manage your digital safety and your privacy. So hopefully you can attend that, but that will be recorded. So we'll be able to share that with you. And then I think, Corinne, if you want to stop recording, we can get to the Q&A part and I can read them.